The late afternoon sun, a golden, benevolent orb, stretched long shadows across Leo Maxwell's backyard, painting the turquoise water of his expansive pool with shimmering light. Laughter, clear and uninhibited, rippled through the air, the sound of children, neighbors, and friends. It was a symphony Leo had painstakingly composed over the last 7 years, piece by piece, brick by brick, against the backdrop of his father's final heartfelt wish. "Make this place a beacon, son," Arthur Maxwell had rasped, his eyes glassy with illness, gesturing weakly towards the empty, overgrown space behind their modest home. "A place where everyone feels welcome, like the old community center used to be?" And Leo had done just that. What began as a personal project, a coping mechanism after losing his father, blossomed into the beating heart of the Northwood Pines neighborhood. The Maxwell Pool, as it had unofficially become known, was a sprawling, custom-built oasis, far exceeding the typical suburban plunge pool. It featured a shallow entry for toddlers, a deep end with a diving board for the adventurous, and even a section with built-in jets for the elderly residents who used it for hydrotherapy on chilly mornings. Tuesdays were for swim lessons, free, for any kid whose parents couldn't afford the exorbitant rates at the city complex. Wednesdays were Senior Splash, a quieter affair with gentle exercises and lively card games by the poolside. Weekends? They were open house, potluck chaos, a vibrant tapestry of shared food, stories, and splashes. Leo, a man in his late 30s with a kind face etched by years of honest labor and a perpetual tan, moved among them, a benevolent host, his presence as comforting as the warm water. Today, 8-year-old Lily Chen, hair streaming behind her, like seaweed, executed a surprisingly graceful cannonball, sending a wall of water over the edges and eliciting shrieks of delight from her friends. Her father, Mr. Chen, a usually reserved accountant, chuckled from a shaded lounge chair, his gaze soft as he watched his daughter. Mrs. Rodriguez, a sprightly octogenarian, was demonstrating a new water aerobics move to a small cluster of eager ladies, her movements surprisingly fluid for her age. The aroma of grilled hot dogs mingled with the faint scent of chlorine and blooming honeysuckle. It was, to Leo, perfection. A living monument to his father's dream, a testament to what community could truly be. Then, a disruption. Not a sudden storm or a broken filter, but something far more unsettling. A figure emerged from the side gate, moving with an almost robotic precision, her silhouette sharp against the setting sun. Eleanor Vance. She was new to Northwood Pines, having moved into the meticulously manicured house directly across the street only a month ago. Leo had tried on several occasions to offer a friendly wave, a welcoming smile, or even a plate of cookies from a weekend potluck. Each gesture had been met with a stare so glacial it could freeze the summer air. She was a woman of sharp angles, and even sharper opinions, meticulously dressed even on a casual Saturday, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her posture as rigid as a newly poured concrete slab. Today she wasn't just walking, she was marching. Her eyes, magnified by rimless glasses, scanned the scene with an almost clinical disdain, lingering on the boisterous children, the floating toys, the sheer, unbridled joy. A hush began to fall over the poolside gathering, a collective sensing of impending discord. Even Lily's excited chatter tapered off. Eleanor stopped at the very edge of the pool deck, her sensible shoes only inches from the splashed water. She held a large, official-looking envelope, stiff and white, clutched in her impeccably manicured hand. Her gaze, when it finally landed on Leo, was not just cold, but accusatory. "Mr. Maxwell," she began, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth, cutting through the residual echoes of laughter. "I've given you ample time to address this situation." She paused, her eyes sweeping over the assembled neighbors as if they were complicit in some grand transgression. But clearly, My concerns have fallen on deaf ears. Leo, still wiping barbecue sauce from his chin, felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He'd known this was coming, but he hadn't anticipated the theatricality, the public confrontation. He managed a strained smile. "Mrs. Vance, good to see you. Is everything all right? Care for a hot dog?" He gestured lamely towards the grill. Hoping to diffuse the tension, Eleanor's lips thinned into a line that spoke volumes of her disapproval. "Everything is decidedly not all right, Mr. Maxwell. This establishment you're operating is a clear violation of municipal codes, zoning regulations, and, frankly, common decency." She held up the envelope, shaking it slightly for emphasis. "I have here a cease and desist order along with formal complaints I've filed with the City Planning Department, the Health Department, and the Neighborhood Association." A collective gasp rippled through the gathered neighbors. Mr. Chen, who had risen from his chair, looked stunned. Mrs. Rodriguez's hand flew to her chest. The children, sensing the shift in mood, began to climb out of the pool, their innocent faces replaced by expressions of confusion and alarm. "Cease and desist." Leo's voice was a rough whisper. "What are you talking about? This is my private pool. This is my home." "It ceased being a private pool the moment you started operating it as a public amenity," Eleanor retorted, her voice rising, gaining momentum. "With no permits, no proper safety protocols, no commercial licensing, the noise, the traffic, the sheer volume of people traipsing through our quiet neighborhood. It's an unacceptable nuisance, and a highly illegal one, at that." She took a step closer, extending the envelope towards him. "I've documented everything, Mr. Maxwell. Every splash, every car parked illegally on the street, every late-night gathering. This will all be presented to the authorities. You have exactly 7 days to drain this public health hazard and return your property to a state that is compliant with the law." Leo's jaw tightened. The blood drained from his face, replaced by a flush of indignant anger. "Public health hazard? Mrs. Vance, we have strict filtration, daily chemical checks, and a sign-in sheet for every visitor. We've never had an incident. This pool is a safe place, a clean place. It's a place where kids learn to swim and seniors find relief from their aches." His voice grew louder, reflecting the tremor in his hands. "It's a community asset. It's what my father dreamed of." "Your father's dreams do not supersede municipal law, Mr. Maxwell," she stated, unyielding. "And your quaint interpretation of community asset does not exempt you from operating an unlicensed commercial enterprise in a residential zone. This isn't a charity, it's a liability, and it's an eyesore." Her gaze swept across the vibrant scene as, if seeing only chaos and disorder, Mr. Chen, finding his voice, stepped forward. "Eleanor, please. This pool, it's a blessing. My daughter, Lily, learned to swim here. Without Leo, she would never have had the opportunity. This is not a business. It's a gift." Mrs. Rodriguez chimed in, her voice surprisingly firm for her age. "Indeed. My arthritis has never felt better since I started my exercises here. You are threatening to take away something truly precious from this neighborhood, Mrs. Vance." Eleanor merely turned her gaze, cold and unwavering, on each defender. "Your personal sentiments do not negate the law. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, and complicity in its violation is equally punishable. I suggest you all reconsider your patronage of this unsanctioned facility." She finally thrust the envelope into Leo's chest, the corner digging uncomfortably into his skin. 7 days, Mr. Maxwell. After that, expect official action. You've been warned." With that, she turned on her heel and marched back out through the gate, her rigid posture broadcasting her triumph. The only sound left was the gentle lapping of the water, now feeling oddly ominous, and the strained silence of the shocked neighbors. Leo stood there, the white envelope a stark accusation in his hand, its paper surprisingly heavy. The vibrant gold of the sun now felt like a spotlight on his humiliation and burgeoning fear. He looked at the faces around him, the worry in Mr. Chen's eyes, the sadness etched on Mrs. Rodriguez's face, the bewildered children. He saw their trust, their reliance, and their quiet plea. His father's words echoed in his mind. A beacon, son. How could a beacon be illegal? How could a place of joy and solace be deemed a nuisance? He crumpled the envelope slightly, the crisp paper protesting. He had permits for the construction of the pool, of course. All the building codes were meticulously followed. But a commercial license? He wasn't charging a dime. This wasn't a business. It was an extension of his home, an open door to his community. He had never considered it anything else. The thought that anyone could see it differently, could see it as a threat, was a profound and painful shock. He walked over to the edge of the pool, dipping his hand into the cool water. The surface, usually so inviting, now seemed to reflect the sharp, unyielding image of Eleanor Vance's face. 7 days. 7 days to prove that his father's legacy, his beacon, wasn't a crime. 7 days to fight for something that felt as essential as the air they breathed in Northwood Pines. He looked up at the darkening sky, the first stars beginning to prick through the fading blue. The battle had just begun, and the stakes felt immeasurable. The silence that descended upon Leo Maxwell's backyard after Eleanor Vance's departure was thick, suffocating. The joyous echoes of children's laughter had been replaced by a heavy, uncertain stillness. Neighbors lingered, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and dawning fear. Leo stood rooted to the spot, the cease and desist order clutched in his hand, its sharp edges biting into his palm. His mind raced, a chaotic swirl of indignation, disbelief, and a cold dread. 7 days. 7 days to fight a woman who wielded bureaucracy like a weapon. Mr. Chen was the first to break the spell, approaching Leo with a tentative hand on his shoulder. Leo, what? What does this mean? She can't just do this, can she? His voice, usually composed, wavered with genuine concern. Mrs. Rodriguez, her normally bright eyes clouded with worry, added, That woman has no soul. She doesn't understand what this pool means to us, to the children. A chorus of murmured agreements followed. Parents huddled, their children clinging to their legs, sensing the adult tension. Leo looked at their faces, at their silent plea. This wasn't just about his pool anymore. It was about their pool, their sanctuary, their community. His resolve hardened. No, Leo said, his voice low but firm. She can't just do this. Not without a fight. He unfurled the crumpled envelope, scanning the official-sounding jargon. She's filed complaints with the city planning, health department, and the neighborhood association. The legal boilerplate says operating an unlicensed commercial enterprise in a residential zone and public nuisance. He scoffed at the last part. Commercial enterprise, scoffed Mark Jensen, a burly mechanic who'd been bringing his kids to the pool for years. You don't charge a dime, Leo. You've probably spent more money on chlorine than she pays in property taxes. It doesn't matter what he charges, Mark, interjected Sarah Davies, a former paralegal, her brow furrowed in thought. The issue is intent and public access. If it's being used by people who don't live on the property, and it's not strictly for family and invited private guests, some zoning laws can interpret that as commercial, regardless of whether money changes hands, especially if it generates noise or traffic, which is what she's leaning on with the nuisance claim. A new wave of unease rippled through the group. Sarah's words, grounded in legal reality, were a sobering counterpoint to their emotional outrage. So what do we do? Asked Lily's mother, her voice tight with anxiety. Lily, now wrapped in a towel, was looking up at Leo, her lower lip trembling. Leo took a deep breath. First, I need to understand exactly what she's accusing me of, legally. I'll call a lawyer first thing tomorrow. And second, we need to show the city exactly what this pool is. It's not a nuisance. It's a necessity. Over the next few days, The neighborhood transformed. The initial shock gave way to a quiet, determined mobilization. The usual joyful sounds of splashing were muted, replaced by the rustle of papers and hushed conversations. Eleanor Vance's house across the street seemed to emanate a smug, silent watch, her curtains occasionally twitching. Leo, true to his word, spent the better part of Monday on the phone. His first call to a local lawyer specializing in property law was disheartening. "Mr. Maxwell," the lawyer, a dry, pragmatic voice named Mr. Harrison, explained, "the law can be interpreted very broadly. If your pool is being used by the general public, even if for free, it can be viewed as an accessory use that has crossed the line into a principal use, requiring different zoning and permitting. The nuisance argument is often subjective, but can be strengthened by multiple complaints. But it's a community service," Leo argued, frustration mounting. "That's a noble sentiment, Mr. Maxwell, but the city doesn't have a noble sentiment category for permits. They have commercial, residential, recreational facilities with specific licensing and so on. We'll need to explore the specifics. Ordinances in Northwood Pines. It's an uphill battle, especially if Ms. Vance has detailed records of traffic and gatherings." The news was a heavy blow. The legal path was murky, expensive, and didn't seem to care about the good his pool was doing. Meanwhile, the community sprang into action. Mr. Chen, with his meticulous accounting skills, started organizing a petition, going door to door, explaining the situation to every resident in Northwood Pines, not just those who used the pool. Sarah Davies began researching local zoning laws, poring over complex municipal codes, highlighting any clauses that might offer Leo a loophole or a defense. Mrs. Rodriguez, leveraging her extensive network of senior citizens, orchestrated a letter-writing campaign, each letter detailing the personal impact of the pool on their health and well-being. Even Lily, armed with crayons, drew pictures of happy children swimming, intending to give them to the city council. The collective effort was heartwarming, a testament to the bonds forged around Leo's pool, but it also put a target on their backs. Eleanor Vance seemed to interpret their solidarity as an act of defiance. Her actions became more overt, more aggressive. Tuesday morning, a large, official-looking "for sale" sign appeared abruptly in front of Eleanor's house, not just for her property, but for the entire vacant lot adjacent to it. It was a prime piece of land stretching along the far side of Leo's property line, largely ignored until now. The sign bore the logo of Elite Property Developments, a large, out-of-town firm known for its aggressive, high-density residential projects. Leo felt a chill. Was this just a coincidence, or was Eleanor Vance playing a much larger game? He dismissed it as paranoia. She was focused on his pool, not developing land. Later that week, a representative from the city's health department, a stern woman in a crisp uniform, showed up unannounced at Leo's gate. She was polite, but unyielding. "We've received a formal complaint regarding public health risks associated with an unregistered recreational facility. I need to inspect the premises, Mr. Maxwell." Leo, suppressing a surge of panic, led her through his backyard. She moved with practiced efficiency, testing the water, scrutinizing the filtration system, examining the chemical logs Leo meticulously kept. She measured the fence height, checked the emergency signage, and even noted the presence of a first aid kit. Leo answered every question, honestly, providing every piece of documentation he had. He watched her jot notes on a clipboard, her expression unreadable. He felt like a criminal on trial in his own home. When she finished, she offered a tight-lipped smile. "Your facility appears to meet current health and safety standards for a private residential pool, Mr. Maxwell. The water quality is excellent. However," she paused, her gaze flicking towards the open gate, "the nature of its use, as indicated in the complaint, falls outside the scope of a typical residential pool. This is a matter for zoning and permitting. My report will reflect our findings." Her words were professional, but the implication was clear. While his pool was clean, it was still perceived as illegal in its operation. The next day, a similarly formal letter arrived from the city's zoning department, echoing the health department's concerns. It stated that based on observed activity and multiple documented complaints, his pool was operating as a de facto public recreational facility without the necessary permits and variances. It reiterated the 7-day deadline, adding that failure to comply would result in fines and, potentially, a court order to cease operations. The noose was tightening. The city wasn't just taking Eleanor Vance's side. They were actively investigating, validating her claims. Leo felt a surge of desperation. He had to act, and fast. That evening, a neighborhood meeting was called, not at Leo's house, but at the small community hall, a neutral territory. The hall was packed, standing room only. The air hummed with nervous energy. Leo stood at the podium, looking out at the anxious faces of his friends and neighbors. He explained the legal jargon, the city's stern warnings, the impending fines. "So, what's the plan, Leo?" asked a concerned father from the back. "Can we win this?" Leo looked at the petition, now filled with hundreds of signatures, at the stack of heartfelt letters. "Mr. Harrison, my lawyer, says it's tough. We need to prove that this isn't a commercial enterprise and that it's not a nuisance. But the biggest hurdle is the public access part. That's what she's leaning on." Sarah Davies raised her hand. "I've been digging through the city codes. There's a specific variance for community benefit facilities, but it's typically for nonprofits or officially registered organizations. It's incredibly difficult to get for a private residence. However, I found something else, a very old, rarely used clause. The Neighborhood Good Samaritan Act of 1972. A ripple of curiosity went through the room. "What's that?" Leo asked, his voice tinged with a flicker of hope. "It was enacted when the old community center closed down," Sarah explained, holding up a thick municipal code book. "It offers specific exemptions for private properties that provide essential, uncompensated public services during times of demonstrable community need, provided certain safety and accessibility criteria are met. It's almost impossible to qualify for now because it was designed for things like emergency shelters during natural disasters or temporary food banks. But," she continued, looking directly at Leo, "the original legislative intent mentions bridging gaps in community infrastructure, and it specifically defines community infrastructure as including recreational and educational facilities. The community hall became Leo Maxwell's second home. The air, usually stale with the scent of old coffee and forgotten bylaws, now crackled with purpose. Night after night, the lights burned late as Leo, Sarah, Mr. Chen, Mrs. Rodriguez, and a rotating cast of dedicated neighbors strategized, debated, and practiced. The Neighborhood Good Samaritan Act was their anchor, a lifeline thrown from a forgotten past. "We need to prove demonstrable community need and insufficient public alternatives," Sarah repeated, pacing in front of a whiteboard covered in flowcharts and bullet points. Her eyes, usually calm, now held a sharp, determined glint. "That means data, personal testimonies, and a clear, compelling narrative." Mr. Chen, ever the numbers man, took charge of the data. He meticulously compiled statistics. The number of children who'd learned to swim at Leo's pool compared to the rising cost and limited availability of city-run lessons. He charted the increase in senior mobility reported by Mrs. Rodriguez's informal water aerobics group, noting the absence of similar affordable programs in Northwood Pines. He even tracked the average car traffic on Leo's street on pool days, cross-referencing it with typical residential traffic, aiming to debunk Eleanor's nuisance claim. "Her traffic complaints are inflated," he declared, tapping a printout. "Most of the traffic is just residents' cars, parked responsibly." Meanwhile, Leo and Sarah worked on the narrative. They spent hours with neighbors, helping them craft their personal testimonies. Lily's mother, hesitant at first, found her voice, recounting how her daughter's fear of water vanished at Leo's pool, how it had opened up a world of confidence. Old Mr. Henderson, a reclusive veteran who found solace in the quiet morning swims, spoke of the pool as his only source of relief from chronic pain and isolation. Each story was a brushstroke, painting a vivid picture of the pool's undeniable value. "Remember," Leo coached, "we're not just defending a pool. We're showing them what a community looks like, what it needs." As they worked, Eleanor Vance remained a silent, ominous presence. Her tinted sedan still glided slowly past the community hall during their late-night sessions, a phantom reminder of her surveillance. The "For Sale" sign on her adjacent lot remained, the logo for Elite Property Developments, a constant, unsettling thought in the back of Leo's mind. He still dismissed it as unconnected. Surely her vendetta was personal, not part of some grander scheme. But then, the subtle attacks began. First, an anonymous tip to the city's code enforcement about excessive noise violations from Leo's property. Late at night, a complaint that proved baseless given their quiet, strategic meetings. Then, a few days later, a cryptic message was left on the Northwood Pines neighborhood online forum, accusing certain residents of colluding to bypass established laws for personal gain, clearly aimed at Leo. The post was quickly taken down by the forum moderator, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The most jarring incident occurred when Mrs. Rodriguez found her tires slashed. She lived only 2 blocks from Leo, and while there was no direct proof, the timing and the fact that nothing else was stolen felt too coincidental. Fear began to creep in, chilling the neighborhood's resolve. "This is intimidation," Mark Jensen fumed, his hands clenching into fists. "She's trying to scare us off." Leo felt a surge of cold fury. Eleanor Vance wasn't just fighting his pool, she was attacking his friends, his family. This wasn't about the law anymore. It was personal. He called Mr. Harrison, his lawyer, explaining the escalating incidents. "It's circumstantial, Mr. Maxwell," Harrison advised, his voice measured. "But it shows a pattern of harassment. Document everything: time, date, details. If it continues, we can file a counter-complaint for harassment and defamation, but our priority is still the council hearing." The day of the city council hearing dawned gray and overcast, matching the tension in Leo's stomach. The council chambers, usually sparsely populated, were packed. Every seat was taken, and people stood along the walls, a sea of familiar faces from Northwood Pines, a silent testament to their solidarity. Eleanor Vance sat in the front row, ramrod straight, her expression a mask of cool composure, a thin smile playing on her lips as she surveyed the crowd. She was flanked by 2 sharp-suited individuals Leo didn't recognize, one of whom held a thick briefcase. The hearing began with the usual bureaucratic preamble, but the air was thick with anticipation. Finally, Leo was called to present his case. He walked to the podium, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He looked at the council members, a mix of weary politicians and civic-minded citizens, then at his neighbors, their eyes fixed on him, full of hope and anxiety. He took a deep breath. "Council members, neighbors," Leo began, his voice surprisingly steady. "I stand before you today not just to defend my pool, but to defend a vital part of our community. This isn't a business. It's a home where everyone is welcome. It's a classroom where children overcome fear. It's a therapy center for our seniors. It's a gathering place, a social hub, a space where bonds are forged and lives are enriched." He then presented Mr. Chen's data, projected onto a screen, showing the clear need and the inadequacy of public alternatives. Sarah followed, delving. into the intricacies of the Neighborhood Good Samaritan Act, explaining how Leo's pool precisely fit its rarely invoked criteria. She presented the hundreds of petition signatures, the stack of heartfelt letters, each one a testament to the pool's indispensable role. Then came the testimonies. One by one, neighbors stepped forward, their voices trembling with emotion, sharing their personal stories. Lily, surprisingly brave, stood on a small stool, holding up her crayon drawings, her clear voice explaining how Leo taught her to float. Mrs. Rodriguez, ignoring Eleanor Vance's glare, spoke passionately about regaining her mobility. The council. Members listened, some nodding, others exchanging thoughtful glances. When it was Eleanor Vance's turn, she strode to the podium with an air of absolute certainty. Her voice was calm, controlled, utterly devoid of emotion. "Council members," she began, "while I appreciate the emotional appeals, we must deal in facts and law. Mr. Maxwell is operating a de facto public facility in a residential zone. This is a clear violation of zoning ordinances, and it creates undeniable nuisances, noise, traffic, and potential liability issues for the entire neighborhood." She then presented her own evidence, photographs of crowded pool days, a detailed log of perceived excessive noise, and a printout of anonymous online complaints, presumably the ones she'd initiated. Her two sharp-suited companions stepped forward, one holding up architectural blueprints. "Furthermore," Eleanor continued, her voice gaining a steely edge, "I must address the larger issue at hand. This uncontrolled community asset is not only a present nuisance but also a significant impediment to future community development." She gestured to the man with the blueprints. "My colleagues from Elite Property Developments are here today to discuss a proposed plan for the vacant lot adjacent to Mr. Maxwell's property and extending along this block. A plan, I might add, that includes a proper, permitted, and professionally managed community pool alongside much-needed new housing for Northwood Pines." A collective gasp swept through the chambers. Leo felt a cold dread wash over him, suddenly understanding the "for sale" sign, the meticulous complaints, the escalating harassment. This wasn't just about his pool. It was about her profit. Eleanor. Vance wasn't just a disgruntled neighbor, she was a developer, working to clear his property, to pave the way for her own grand scheme. The illegal pool was merely an obstacle to be removed. Eleanor Vance concluded with a triumphant, chilling smile. "Therefore, Council, I urge you to uphold the law and allow progress to move forward. The community deserves a legitimate facility, not a backyard free-for-all that obstructs vital growth." Leo stared at the architectural blueprints being unfurled, his heart sinking. A proper community pool. Her words twisted like a knife. It wasn't just his pool she was trying to shut down. It was the very spirit of Northwood Pines. The council members now looked less thoughtful and more calculating, their eyes shifting between the architectural plans and Leo's stunned face. The true depth of Eleanor Vance's deception and the massive financial interest behind her crusade had just been laid bare before the entire city council. A collective gasp ripped through the city council chambers, a tidal wave of shock and betrayal. Leo Maxwell felt the blood drain from his face, replaced by a cold, burning rush of fury. The for sale sign, the vacant lot, the relentless harassment, it all clicked into place with a sickening thud. Eleanor Vance wasn't just a disgruntled neighbor. She was a corporate operative, a pawn in a much larger game, orchestrating a land grab under the guise of civic duty. Her concern for noise and legality was a smokescreen for profit. The two sharp-suited men from Elite Property Development stepped forward, unrolling even larger glossy renderings of their proposed development. They depicted sleek modern townhouses, crammed onto the vacant lot, and indeed a gleaming, sterile-looking community pool with sharp lines and no visible children. It was a vision of Northwood Pines that was unrecognizable, devoid of warmth or charm. "This is an outrage!" shouted Mark Jensen from the back, his voice booming. "She's trying to steal our community!" Murmurs of agreement, angry and accusatory, rippled through the crowd. Council members, initially looking intrigued by the development plans, now shifted uneasily, casting wary glances at Eleanor and then at the outraged faces of Northwood Pines residents. The carefully constructed facade of community improvement that Elite Property Developments was attempting to project was crumbling under the weight of public indignation. Eleanor Vance, however, remained unruffled. Her smile tightened, a cold, self-satisfied smirk. "Progress, Mr. Jensen," she stated, her voice cutting through the noise. "This is simply progress, an upgrade, a proper facility for a modern neighborhood." Leo, though reeling, found a spark of raw defiance ignite within him. He straightened his shoulders, his gaze fixed on Eleanor. "Progress," he echoed, his voice rising, imbued with a sudden searing clarity. "This isn't progress, Mrs. Vance. This is a hostile takeover. You didn't care about illegal pools or nuisances. You cared about this land, about turning a vibrant community into a high-density, high-profit development." He pointed at the pristine rendering of Elite's proposed pool. "You call that a proper facility? Will children who can't afford lessons learn to swim there for free? Will our seniors find gentle hydrotherapy without exorbitant fees? Will families gather for potlucks and impromptu celebrations? Or will it be a gated, exclusive amenity for your new, expensive housing, effectively segregating our own residents? From what you deem proper, recreation?" His voice thundered through the chamber, carrying the weight of a betrayed community. "My pool, the one you call illegal, was built out of love, out of a promise to my father to create a place for everyone. It was paid for with my sweat and savings, not with the predatory capital of a development firm. It is a community asset because it serves the community, freely and openly, without prejudice or profit." The council president, a long-serving stoic woman named Ms. Albright, cleared her throat, bringing a measure of order back to the room. "Ms. Vance, while we acknowledge your presentation regarding the proposed development, this hearing is primarily focused on the variance request for Mr. Maxwell's property and the complaints lodged against it. The development proposal is a separate matter, though certainly relevant to the long-term vision for Northwood Pines." She then turned to Leo. "Mr. Maxwell, do you have any further arguments regarding your Good Samaritan Act claim, particularly in light of Ms. Vance's comprehensive proposal?" Leo took a deep breath, fighting to control the tremor in his hands. "Yes, Ms. Albright, I do. The Good Samaritan Act was put in place precisely for situations like this, to protect grassroots community initiatives when external forces, whether economic or otherwise, threaten to dismantle existing infrastructure or fail to provide adequate alternatives. Elite Property Development's proposal is not an alternative for our community. It's a displacement. It's an attempt to replace a proven, beloved, free community service with a for-profit venture that will exclude the very people my pool was built to serve." He then looked directly at the council members, his eyes blazing with conviction. "You have heard our testimonies. You have seen our data. We are not a nuisance. We are a necessity. And we ask you to see beyond the glossy brochures and the legal threats and recognize the true community asset that stands in my backyard." A ripple of renewed applause erupted from the Northwood Pines residents. Eleanor Vance's composure finally cracked, a flicker of genuine anger crossing her face. The Elite Property Development representatives, looking less confident now, began whispering furiously to her. Ms. Albright, sensing the volatile atmosphere, banged her gavel. "Order! Order!" in the chamber, she then announced. "The council has heard compelling arguments from both sides. Given the complexity of the matter, particularly the implications of the Neighborhood Good Samaritan Act and the newly presented development proposal, the council requires time for deliberation. We will adjourn for 2 weeks to review all submitted, Evidence, testimonies, and proposals, a decision will be rendered at that time. The pronouncement hung in the air, a mix of relief and renewed tension. 2 weeks. 2 weeks for the council to decide the fate of his pool and perhaps the very character of Northwood Pines. As the chamber emptied, Eleanor Vance turned to Leo, her smile gone, replaced by a look of pure, cold animosity. "You've merely delayed the inevitable, Mr. Maxwell," she hissed, her voice barely audible above the departing crowd. "Elite Property Developments doesn't just buy land, we buy influence. Your sentimental little pool is no match for progress." Leo met her gaze, a new steely resolve in his own eyes. "Maybe not, Mrs. Vance, but a community's heart is a lot harder to buy than a piece of land." He watched her and her suited companions gather their blueprints and exit, their faces grim. The battle had just escalated from a neighborhood dispute to a corporate war. Leo knew they had to find a new weapon, something to counter the influence Eleanor had so arrogantly boasted about. The community gathered around him, their faces a mix of worry and defiance. They had faced down a bully, but now they faced a giant. The stakes were higher, the enemy more powerful, and the path forward more treacherous than ever. The 2 weeks that followed the city council hearing stretched like an eternity, each day heavy with anticipation. The revelation of Eleanor Vance's true motives and Elite Property Development's predatory agenda had galvanized Northwood Pines like never before. The initial shock had morphed into a fierce collective resolve. This was no longer just about Leo's pool, it was about their home, their way of life, and the very soul of their community. The community hall became a war room. Mr. Chen, fueled by righteous indignation, dove deep into the financial history of Elite Property Developments. He unearthed articles from obscure regional papers, old planning commission minutes from other towns, and property records that painted a stark picture. Elite had a pattern. Acquire land in established, often working-class neighborhoods, use aggressive tactics to remove existing, less profitable structures, and then push through high-density luxury developments, effectively pricing out long-time residents. "They're land sharks," Mr. Chen declared one evening, his usually placid face grim. "They've done this before. Small, family-owned businesses, community hubs. They target anything that stands in the way of maximum profit." Sarah Davies, meanwhile, focused on the legal angle. She pored over zoning laws, environmental impact reports, and public records related to Elite's past projects. Her breakthrough came late one night, buried deep in the supplementary documents of an old permit application from another city. "A pattern of non-compliance," she murmured, eyes glued to her laptop screen. "Minor violations, but consistent. And a few lawsuits from residents concerning construction defects and environmental runoff." It wasn't a smoking gun for this case, but it revealed Elite's modus operandi: cut corners, push boundaries. Leo, fueled by the community's unwavering support, felt a renewed sense of purpose. He spent hours on the phone with Mr. Harrison, his lawyer, discussing strategies. They needed something more than just personal testimonies. They needed to expose Elite's true intentions and vulnerabilities. Eleanor Vance, however, was not idle. Whispers circulated through the neighborhood, rumors of Leo's unlicensed activities leading to potential health risks, subtle threats about increased property taxes if the development was blocked. A glossy brochure appeared in mailboxes, seemingly from an anonymous, concerned resident, detailing the benefits of modernizing Northwood Pines with new housing and amenities, subtly discrediting outdated structures and unmanaged spaces. It was a smear campaign, subtle but insidious, designed to sow discord and doubt before the final vote. One afternoon, as Leo was leaving the community hall, he found a note tucked under his windshield wiper. It was a single sentence, typed, "Some things are worth more than money. Some things are worth fighting for." There was no name, but a small hand-drawn heart was scrawled at the bottom. It was a simple gesture, but it reminded Leo that for every calculating move Eleanor made, there were countless acts of quiet solidarity. The day of the final council decision arrived, cloaked in a tense silence that hung over Northwood Pines. The council chambers were even more packed than before, overflowing with residents. The air was thick with a nervous electric energy. Leo felt every eye on him as he walked in, nodding to his friends, taking his seat. Eleanor Vance was already there, in the front row, flanked by the elite property development's executives. Her expression was a controlled blend of confidence and disdain. She gave Leo a fleeting, icy stare that promised defeat. The council session began with standard procedural matters, but everyone knew what was coming. Finally, Council President Albright cleared her throat. We now move to the matter of the variance. Request for Mr. Leo Maxwell's property and the associated complaints. She shuffled some papers. The council has thoroughly reviewed all submitted evidence, testimonies, and the accompanying development proposal from elite property developments. A hush fell over the room. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He felt the weight of his father's dream, the hopes of his neighbors, pressing down on him. Ms. Albright continued, her voice steady. We acknowledge the detailed arguments presented by Ms. Vance and Elite Property Developments regarding the economic benefits of their proposed project. However, the council must weigh these against the existing fabric of our community and the specific protections afforded under city ordinances, particularly the Neighborhood Good Samaritan Act of 1972. Eleanor Vance leaned forward, her face taut with anticipation, a slight victorious smirk forming. Our investigation, Ms. Albright continued, included a comprehensive review of all zoning interpretations, a reevaluation of the definition of public nuisance in a residential context, and a deep dive into the historical intent of the Good Samaritan Act. We also considered the documented past practices of elite property developments in other jurisdictions. She paused, her eyes sweeping over the council members, then settling on Eleanor Vance. While Mr. Maxwell's pool, by strict modern interpretation, might fall into a gray area regarding a private residential facility, the evidence presented by the residents of Northwood Pines, particularly the hundreds of signatures, the compelling personal testimonies, and Mr. Chen's meticulous data, unequivocally demonstrates a demonstrable community need and insufficient public alternatives for affordable recreational and therapeutic facilities for youth and seniors. A wave of murmurs, then hushed whispers, rippled through the audience. Eleanor Vance's face began to pale. Furthermore, Ms. Albright declared, her voice gaining strength, our legal counsel has found that Elite Property Development's proposed community pool, while aesthetically pleasing, does not meet the criteria for an essential, uncompensated public service as defined by the Good Samaritan Act. It is, by their own admission, an amenity primarily for the residents of their proposed for-profit housing. To deny Mr. Maxwell's variance request would be to prioritize a future for-profit, exclusive amenity over a current, established, and freely accessible community asset that demonstrably fills a vital gap. Eleanor Vance's jaw dropped. The elite. Executives beside her exchanged frantic, disbelieving glances. Therefore, Ms. Albright concluded, her voice ringing with authority, it is the unanimous decision of this city council to grant the variance for Mr. Leo Maxwell's pool, recognizing its status under the Neighborhood Good Samaritan Act as an essential community service. All complaints regarding its operation as a public nuisance are hereby dismissed. The Maxwell pool is officially recognized as a protected community asset. A deafening roar erupted from the chambers, cheers, applause, cries of joy. People hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. Leo felt a dizzying surge of relief, followed by an overwhelming wave of gratitude. He looked at his neighbors, their faces beaming, and saw his father's dream, vibrant and alive, Eleanor Vance, white with rage, sprang to her feet. "This is preposterous! You can't—" Ms. Albright, her gaze firm, cut her off. "Ms. Vance, your microphone is off. This decision is final." The council also notes, in light of public concern and Elite Property Development's past record, that any future development proposals for Northwood Pines will be subject to heightened scrutiny and a thorough environmental and community impact assessment. Eleanor Vance stood there, frozen, a picture of absolute defeat. Her grand scheme, built on the cynical premise that money and influence could buy anything, had shattered against the unbreakable wall of a united community. The illegal pool, dismissed as a nuisance, had turned out to be the very symbol of Northwood Pines' unyielding spirit, its most powerful asset. Leo watched her turn, her face contorted with fury, and storm out of the chambers, her expensive shoes clicking sharply on the polished floor, a sound of bitter retreat. The victory wasn't just his. It was a triumph for every backyard beacon, every quiet act of kindness, and every community that dared to stand up for its heart.